afternoon, everyone. It's not always the best to be the first session after a tea break, because if the session is boring, you actually have absolutely nothing to blame. In the words of one of our panelists here today, fashion is not the land of the stupids. And just because we are invested in fashion, it doesn't mean that we care any less about the world. Over the last 2 days here, we've been having lots of conversations across verticals on how to shape a better future. Fashion might possibly stand out a bit because we have an increasing tendency to see the world in silos, and fashion and luxury over the years have gathered all sorts of associations with waste and extravagance and vanity and unsustainability. So part of what we hope to achieve this afternoon is to try to change some of that. And I think we have the best possible people here to do that. A friend yesterday coined the word thinkfluencer, and I think Prabal Gurung, Mary Katrantzou, Manish Malhotra, 3 designers from 3 fashion capitals across the world are thinkfluencers in the best sense of the word. So before we start off, I just want to start with asking each of you what you see as the biggest issue plaguing the fashion industry right now, and one promising trend for 2020 that you think could really set off for a better future, for a better tomorrow. So Prabal, since you've traveled the farthest, let's start with you.
Hi everyone, I'm glad to be here. I think it's just not the industry, but I think one thing that's plaguing our entire planet is the apathy. The absolute, let's say, lack of desire to really speak up when there's injustice, whether the injustice is in a social cause, whether it's injustice regarding climate crisis, whether women's rights, LGBTQ rights, or minority rights. I think, we think about fashion and we think about clothes and what goes on the runway, and, XYZ style wears, and certain, girl wears a dress and walks into the party or something like that. But fashion is a lot more than that. Fashion is an industry, it's the biggest contributor to pollution, one of the biggest contributors. And also, I think fashion, at the same time, is a visual challenger to status quo, what is out there. So whether it's through, challenging the patriarchy, challenging, the conversation, difficult conversation we have around race, religion, or I'd say size, age, and all that stuff. So I think for me, the biggest, when I see apathy and lack of empathy, that I think is what is plaguing not just the industry, in the entire universe right now. And
what's the one thing in 2020 that you think could lead to a better tomorrow?
Empathy and caring, literally that, there is a silver lining to all of these. There's no doubt about it. But I think one thing what fashion really can do and does well when it's done right is it can accelerate the conversation and amplify the volume. Any kind of difficult conversation that we might be having in our living room, all of a sudden when it comes out, whether it's through runway, whether it's through advertising, whether through anything that we do, who we dress and where it's made, who's making it, I think we can have that kind of a conversation. And fashion is the perfect place right now, because when I look in America, when I look at it, whether it's the athletes, whether it's the rappers, the musicians and actors, everyone is interested in fashion. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Met Gala, right, that happens, I think the number of views, the impressions is bigger than NFL right now. Right. Fashion is the biggest player right now, so it becomes a responsibility that we create fabulous dreams and desires and make fun and have a fun time, but at the same time, don't forget the substantive conversation around it. I'm sorry, I'm talking too long. Go ahead.
Mary, before you tell us what you think is awful this year and what's great next year, I want to say that both Prabal and Mary are celebrating, 10 years of their label this year, yeah. And they've known each other right from the start.
Yes, so Mary just finished her 11th, I just finished my 10th, and I've been a big stalker of Mary's work, because I've loved her, because when she came out with the whole you actually changed how that particular era in fashion with digital prints.
Right.
You know, you completely, I never thought, I never, because I was such a traditionalist and I never thought, you know, it could be, you know, done in that way. And, you know, I would say the work, surrealism in your work, you know, and all that stuff. It was like, I was like from New York looking into London, I was like, damn, that's major.
Yeah,
you know?
so there's a little fan club.
I am
going
totally,
on there.
totally. I mean, her recent collection that she did in Greece, right? Yeah. It was phenomenal. I had tears in my eyes. It was so phenomenal. It was like, you know, like, the reason why I say this is like, you know, all of us, you know, all three of us are in, yes, we make beautiful clothes, we do runway shows, we're also, at the end of the day, we're in business of making money also. We need to survive. And that kind of clothes that you did there, it takes such an audacity and courage to do it. So for me, it was really, really inspiring. So yes, I'm a fanboy here.
I mean, he literally is the most eloquent speaker, and I must say, first of all, thank you. It's nice to be brought up in a generation where there's a dialogue and a mutual sense of respect, and Prabal did what sat me straight after my show at the Temple of Poseidon, so he's not just saying he means it. It meant the world to me because, you know, everyone, as he says, and Manish, you know it too, we're kind of in a lane, and it's a very competitive business, and it's the pace is relentless, and to take a moment to say, you know, I appreciate what you did. I'm inspired by that. I look at, you know, the generation we came up together, and you look at what each designer is doing because you're part of that dialogue, and we create a language, and it's so relevant, and we've like seen each other. We have a lot of common friends, and it's always a conversation on, you know, what is the future of fashion, and where are we going individually, independently as designers, but also as a whole, as a community. So it's very difficult to kind of pinpoint what is let's say, one particular issue that plagues fashion. And I think your answer was so inclusive of what it actually means right now to be responsible and to use your platform responsibly, because I think we have to remember that when you're designing, it's not only how somebody feels individually and that you give them the confidence to be the best version of themselves, it is also, I guess, the industry that's always been so reflective of our times. So in order for a designer to be that filter of what's happening in the environment around them, they need to be so sensitive to that environment, and then through their filter, use their platform for good. So I think for me, the biggest issue now is that there's this uncertainty on how you use your platform while being able to be sustainable first as a business and sustainable within your industry as a designer. And that to me almost requires, as an industry, people to come together. It's a very sometimes individual lane that we're on and path that we're on because it's so relentless. But I feel it's important to say we as a community can use our platform and we can affect change. We can do practical good. We can heighten that sense of community. People, you know, who dress can use fashion and are using fashion as a wellness tool. So we as designers need to be in sync with our times, and that means being inclusive in terms of size, race, gender, all levels of representation, and make sure that we're using that representation. So I think the biggest issue is for the fashion industry as a whole to come together. You know, you giving me a compliment, me giving you a boost, us just getting to know each other, but inspiring each other, being at this panel here in India and thinking, you know, we're on a similar path, but how can we use our platform at the center stage?
But I want to tell the audience about your Temple of Poseidon show, because it's related to what we are speaking about. So to celebrate her 10 years, Mary had a really kind of hard gig trying to convince the 450 BC monument, the managers of the Temple of Poseidon, to give her permission to host a show there. It's the first time ever that the monument has been let out for something like this. And the show was a charity show to raise money for a children's cancer charity in Greece, and that single show raised more money than the charity has raised in 30 years. So there is something to be said about using fashion. And of course, you know, in a similar vein, after the 2015 Nepal earthquake, Prabal really became the international face of, you know, leading the philanthropic effort for relief. And you raised $1 million for that. So we're here with a very illustrious bunch of people. Manish's annual Mijwan Foundation kind of consistently, leads money and resources to craft clusters across India. So, but this begs the question, leads us to, I think, on the other hand, the criticism against all of this is that, how do you draw the line between fashion and activism? Must fashion stay true to fashion? Or are we moving towards a world where too many designers are trying to really use fashion to make too much of a statement? What do you have to say about that?
Maybe we should let Manish talk
Yes.
now.
Good evening, everyone. I suddenly feel really old here on this platform with the two young 10-year-old designers in the business. It's 14 years to my label and, of course, 29 years to costumes
30
in movies.
years, 30 years next year. Yes.
30 years next year. And the fourth generation of actors. So it's, I think that fashion, like movies, like cricket, is a platform which the young to the oldest really enjoy and look at. So I think in these kind of platforms, we should all definitely speak about sustainability, look into all of this. But I think there's a lot of dialogue today on all of this. But I think it's like taking care of your parents. This is something that should come naturally to us. And we should be aware of our environment and take care of everything, whether it's been, as you spoke about, having different genders, racism, or whether it is about classism, or it is about all of that. So I think it is a must, and I'm so glad that it is out there, but it is something that has to be a part of our work. And if we have to progress and if we have to move, we have to really take in consideration that we have to use our platforms like maybe a fashion show or maybe, in a platform like this, speak about it and get more and more people aware, especially the youngsters, the youth who look at fashion today. They're so aware. Like I had this friend of mine whose 14-year-old son knows what shoes to buy. So when he's so involved in what he's buying and he's constantly looking at what's in and out, these are the platforms that we should definitely speak about it and get more and more people conscious. And about recycling, even as designers, wastage, or, and in terms of all that we do, it's really important, I think.
I also think, from the perspective of the consumer and the audience you talk to, what you represent as a brand is not just your aesthetic. It's also the brand values that you really nurture as a company. So to me, there's no distinction in creating a show where you want to create beauty and you create harmony. The context in which that show exists is equally important to somebody feeling an affinity towards your work. So, people are drawn to you for so many reasons. It could be your warmth, it could be your inclusiveness, it could be because you're bold, it could be because you're colorful, it could be so many different, because you cut a great dress, you drape well. But it's not separated why somebody is drawn to a brand from the values it represents, whether that is about inclusivity or whatever activist, let's say, a projection of the beliefs of the designer, of the brand as a whole, are equally important to the design that comes out of that house or of that independent brand. So I think they are interlinked more and more, and people don't maybe are not able to maybe translate that into words, but what you buy and what you want to affiliate yourself with is connected to much more than the beauty it holds.
Manish, this brings us to something we spoke about yesterday, about how when you visualize sustainable fashion, there's now this kind of boring, stereotypical images. Like it's this loose khadi, anti-fit dress that's definitely not sexy, definitely not flattering a woman. And I think a lot of young designers who are graduating feel they need to follow that narrative to appear conscious. But you can have good practices, you can be socially responsible and still make incredibly sexy and fitted dresses. So what do you have to say about that kind of projection?
Well, I think it's social media, it's fashion weeks, and there's so much of platform today where, of course, sustainability has become a word like how couture was a couple of years ago.
It's a hashtag,
it's become a hashtag, and, everybody speaks about it, and then you see a lot of clothes which are not styled or put a lot of more thought to. So it kind of gets eyeballs, as so as to say, and so I think that's where we kind of get in, and like I said, it is something that we all have to be conscious about, not just designers, each one of us today, for a better tomorrow, environmentally and as, educating the youngsters. But I think there is a thin line, and that also should be voiced sometime at panels like these or at fashion weeks and on social media, where young designers and the youth is not there to abuse that word of sustainability or use that to your benefit. And you have to look into that, and we have to all come together and say, no, that is sustainability, we agree, but we also need art, we need fashion, we need work for our craftsmen, and we need a lot more employment. And like Mijma is something that Shabana asked me started 10 years ago, and we started with 40 women, and today we have about 450 women who work. And they're employed, they feel a sense of empowerment. And each year that we do a fashion show where film stars walk and about 50 models walk, we get them to see it, we take the video to them, and they feel so good about it. It's not charity, it's all about empowerment. They feel good that they're doing something. And now we're putting up another center with about 200 more people who are going to work on a home line for me. And I think that is what we need to create a lot. And also, we glamorize the clothes, because I kind of like to do that, and I don't feel sustainability or handloom is always preachy. It doesn't always have to be like, oh my God, look, I'm creating this work for craftsmen, and it's going to be, I'm
So
a
it's not
huge
separate
person.
boxes, they
No,
can exist
it's all
together.
a part of one industry, So when it comes to handloom and when it comes to textile conversation and sustainability, it suddenly gets into a very preachy, self-praisey genre is what I feel. So I think all of us as designers somewhere need to connect and need to give back.
Right. Prabal, you've dressed, a host of public figures. You've dressed Michelle Obama, which made a lot of news in India as well back then. You've dressed Kate Middleton. Public figures and, the choices they make as to what they wear now is also a statement. How is that helping young designers and the kind of statements you want to put out? And who is one person that you would really, really like to dress?
Just not one. There are millions of women that I'd like
Oh,
to dress.
come on,
of course,
Prabal.
So
Name one, name three.
So like for me, when I started the brand in 2009, deep in recession, they had asked me what kind of women I was dressing. At that time, fashion was divided into two groups. It was, if you cared about, like if you were an intelligent woman, you didn't care about fashion. If you cared about fashion, you were not a smart girl.
Right.
That was the kind of the world. When I came in there, I wanted to kind of I was surrounded by women who loved creativity, they were leaders in their own fields, they loved to look good, and they were unapologetic about
Your mother and Gloria Steinem is what you've said in past interviews.
Yes. And just to kind of the bragging rights for me is the Gloria Steinem one, who's been my biggest hero. I mean, I've been such an fan of hers and admirer of her work, and then she ended up coming to my show, and that was the only show she's ever been to, and so to me that was like a validating thing. But going back to, I kept on saying it is a thinking man's sex symbol. That's what I said, which inherently meant that intelligence and style doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. It's not mutually exclusive, it is. So I wanted to celebrate I always say, as a man, my job and as a designer is to not dictate, but give options to women. Especially in this time right now, we're almost 2020, where the patriarchy is still a force in majority of the world. The things, the culture and the politics that's happening across the globe, I always believe that minorities and women need to be in a position of power on a decision-making table. They need to be more than 50% of it, and so I've always celebrated that. So when I have someone like, our former First Lady Michelle Obama, let's say Kate Middleton, Oprah Winfrey's of the world, when they wear it, what it really does to me is they convey this, the conversation and what I stand for, a celebration and unabashed femininity, because I truly, truly believe there's nothing more unnerving than a woman in a full feminine glory to the patriarchy. That is, to me, is the biggest thing.
I think we should clap to that. This explains why you've been called the most feminist man in fashion and the most woke man in fashion.
It's so funny, but I never set out. I wanted to make pretty clothes. I wanted to sell a dream, and I said, I wanted to create a luxury brand with a soul. And soul to me is an ability to see someone in front of you. Through your work, you validate their existence, their presence, and that they matter. So that to me was really important. And, I never set out to become a feminist or something like that, but it's part of it. I always look at it. I'm in business because of women. I sell them, my clothes, they keep me in business. I've been supported by, whether it's Anna Wintour, whether it's in Michelle Obama, I've been supported by them. And when their rights are attacked by the present government there, it is absolutely impossible for me to keep quiet, because I don't think it's fair. I think it's my responsibility to speak up. And going back to what you talked about, like, fashion, whether it should be part of, like, it's too activist, and we're living in different times. Because of digital media and everything, we're all open. We're all into each other, in each other's lives, whether it's through Instagram and whatever it is. So it affects us. We can't pick and choose causes any longer. If you care about, like, say, if you care about what my clothes, and you care about the causes that I stand for, and I think it is the most exciting time to be alive, to see these youngsters who are challenging our generation older than us, the climate crisis. The biggest crisis that's threatening the universe is the climate crisis. It is the youngsters that are, like, challenging the conversation that are being brought forward. I find it to be alive at this particular time, in spite of all the challenges, cultural, social, political. It is the most amazing time. You see that the power no longer just lies with experience and age. Power lies in courage. That's what it is. So
Right.
it's
And
exciting.
we're breaking things all the time and going against power. That's been 2019 in everything. What I want to ask you, Mary, taking forward what Prabal said, how do you draw the line between, say, creative expression and social responsibility? Because you are also running a business. You mentioned yesterday that to do the Temple of Poseidon show and to prepare for it, you had to skip an entire season. There was a commercial cost to it. So as you want to be sustainable in your business as well. It's not a social welfare organization. So how do you take those calls? When do you decide it's worth it? And I think you can specifically use the example of this show to kind of, as a case study to talk about it.
I think, actually, I'm going to step on what Prabal said. As a woman in business, and starting at a time similar to Prabal, where I felt that was acting as a limitation instead of acting as an asset, I thought about how women make decisions. And I was like, okay, a woman, in order to make a decision, has to think very carefully. It has to be a calculated risk. It has to be presented in the best possible way. And she has to have thought about it over and over and over again before she feels the confidence to go forward with it. And when I started my career very naively, I was exactly the same. I was the meticulous student that I would take a risk, but I would have to think about it. And I would be, let's say, in every decision, quite instinctive, because that's what you had to do if you didn't have experience. Now, I think, as a woman entrepreneur, you have to be bold in your choices, and working within the fashion industry, you have to be bold. You have to have a unique voice. You have to be able to stand behind that voice. You have to be able to rely on people who believe in you, because you can never be a single unit that kind of forges into the future alone. And when the opportunity came to do the show at the Temple of Poseidon, everyone around me told me it's not humanly possible to put it together in 2 months. And the more people saying no, the more it drove me to be able to make it be the most important use of a platform that we've been given up until now, because going back to your roots, I think emotionally pushes you in a very different way.
So it was worth it for you because of what this would mean even for the future of your business? It was
Absolutely,
worth it for you
and
to
I did
skip a
every
season.
single thing that I would have given 90%, I would give now 150%. It was also the first time that I visited Mumbai, because we do all our embroideries in India, and I was like, every time we do our embroideries here, and I never have the time to visit. I was like, this show is different. I want to meet every single partner, supplier, friend, collaborator that's part of this show, because this show, to me, was such a huge risk. I was risking so much, as you said, financially, that it had to make it, I had to make it be worthwhile. So actually I came here, we did most of our embroideries with a company called Amir, who heard about it, saw how passionate and driven I was, and came on board as a partner, supporting us, to the point that Rizvi at some point called me, and he was like, Mary, the only way to finish this collection is start suspending people from the ceiling, because it's literally impossible. So what I'm saying is when you're being bold and you take a decision that goes kind of against the grain, and you do so with so many people behind you, you have a different heightened sense of responsibility against your country, against the Ministry of Culture and the Archaeological Committee who gave us a landmark location, against the charity because we were raising money for those children, against your team that really gave it their all. And it makes you see how inspiring a show could be, because we do the same thing over and over again. And there comes a time that you need something that will inspire you to do more, to give more of your heart, give more of your soul, and put everything in it. So to me, I've never seen so many people. I counted, and we had 90 different partners in order for this show to happen across 15 countries. So that's what it takes. And I couldn't have felt more rewarded and fulfilled after that we did something with our platform. And you could see that everyone who attended that show, from the press to friends, felt the same way, because everyone wants to feel that they're part of an industry that can do good. And fashion certainly can. It's a reflection of everything that's happening around. You just need to use that stage and use, people who are writers, who have those words, and words do matter, to communicate that to the world. And I think we're all doing that in a sense, by traveling and communicating a different message, we're becoming that communication. So I think that's what's different now, that you find your voice.
Right. Prabal, how important is it for you to represent your culture and your background overtly in your designs? I mean, your work is very international. I do know your mother had told you around the time of the earthquake that, remember, you're representing Nepal. Is that a burden that you carry on your shoulders, or do you think just being the best designer you can be is more important than trying to shove in some Nepali embroidery somewhere?
No, I think, first of all, I'm in the craft of business of making beautiful clothes, trying to make the beautiful best possible way. So yes, you have to be the best designer possible. That's your first goal always. Regarding, taking, I don't look at it as a burden. I look at it as a privilege that I have to represent a country, and not just Nepal. Like, my majority of my growing up happened in India, in Delhi and Bombay, Mumbai. Sorry, and so for me, that is my identity. That is the very reason that I am just not another designer there, but I'm a designer from this part of the world, from Nepal, and who lived in India, and have that conversation. It is the same thing that because of my roots and things that I get made, my cashmeres are made in Nepal, embroideries done in India. All of that stuff has allowed me to kind of have an identity. So the last collection that I did, there was an incident where I was talking about defining new America, the Americana, because for the longest period of time, Americana has been dictated by the greats, with due respect to them, Ralph Lauren, Donna Karan, Calvin Klein. And when I look at America, it doesn't look just that. It is truly a melting pot. It looks like this room here. It looks like all of us together, and that's what my dining table looks like. And so I was having this, conversation with an investor, potential investor. Eventually, it became a potential investor.
Are they in the room here? I think.
Well, I spot him. I'm just kidding. So basically, we had this conversation, and I talked about the new Americana. I wanted to define it. Then one of the investors said to me, "Well, you don't look American, so how are you going to define it?" So, and I knew what the subtext of that statement was very clear to me, and I mentioned, you basically are saying I don't look white, and then it was the most uncomfortable silence for him, not for me, because I started a dialogue. That led me to do this collection about Americana. So how I did that was took the iconographic of the Americana, what American sports wear, and turned it into a fashion. So the fashion show in itself had its own legitimacy. It was beautiful clothes. It was like all this stuff, craftsmanship and everything. But that's what I think all three of us, that's what we are. And all designers, all creative people, we are storytellers. So we entice people we create stuff, we tell stories, so all of you come to our world, and we have deeper conversation about fashion and about things that we care about. At the end of the day, we are also humans. We are affected by social causes and things that's happening around us. So I think, for me, it becomes, I would say, what the identity, fashion, and everything becomes intertwined, So that's pretty much it. I don't know.
Manish, as you get into your 30th year next year, you've actually thrown a lot of balls in the air over the last few years, getting into jewelry and beauty and home. And you did say that next year is when you have to kind of consolidate all of that. You're also working on possibly the most ambitious film project of your career so far. That's also happening next year. So it's a lot of it. So, in the words of Spider-Man, with, increased responsibility. So as a fashion designer, sphere of influence is increasing. You're no longer just somebody who's making clothes. You're getting into, someone's makeup pouch and home, and you're everywhere. Do you think that with that comes greater responsibility?
Well, absolutely, because for 30 years it's been, so when I'm doing this film called Takht, which is a film which Katrantzou is making on a Mughal period, it requires tons of research, embroidery, and it kind of opens a complete new path for me, which probably I didn't look into. For, like I'm from Ahmedabad to Gujarat Ahmedabad to Hyderabad to Delhi, Agra, traveling, looking for clothes, looking for embroidery influences. And it's something that I'm really, really enjoying. In fact, the actor Shabana Azmi told me the other day that I have never seen you so stressed in the recent...
is this you looking stressed?
No, not now. Now I'm a bit relaxed. I'm listening to all of them. And so, but I've been really stressed on this film. And we had look test with Anil Kapoor, Ranveer Singh, Vicky Kaushal, right in those Diwali days. And it was absolutely crazy. But it's challenging, and I think that at the 30th year of your career, if you have a film that challenges you so much with such a huge star cast, and the belief that every actor and the producer and the director have in me, which is even a bigger sword on my head, is very challenging, and it takes a lot of time, and it stresses you out. I mean, I do get stressed before every show of mine, and I think it's also going to somewhere push me in my mainstream work to experiment, to look at things that I didn't till date, And I think that how many clothes are people going to buy? I mean, while we speak about sustainability and we say, look at your ghar cholas, look at your bandanis, look at those, those beautiful saris that your mother or your grandmother have, and please, wear them again and, get that culture back and don't just leave them or dump them. And we speak, that's also part of sustainability where you say, use your outfits that you have, and you have such lovely heirlooms that probably your grandmother had or your aunt had, and use that again. So I encourage that a lot with my clients.
So Bhaskar was telling me a bride came in to you as a potential client, and you actually lost a lot of business because you said you have no business getting a new lehenga made. You should wear your mother's sari.
Because she showed me the most beautiful ghar chola sari that I had seen. And I told her, you should be using this sari. Why are you,
Is that going to be the future of your business where you're actually not
So that
going
just
to be
means I'm not a good businessman. But I think that sometimes that's your gift back. You like what you're seeing, and you as an artist or as somebody who loves the creative things and beautiful things, you encourage that. So I think when people come to my huge store, there's a lot more than clothes that I want to offer. Whether it's beauty, it's jewelry, it's home, it's things that I like to do, and also challenges you. I'm meeting different people, different youngsters I'm speaking to about what else can we do. So I think like I said, that we are putting up a huge setup in Mijwa, in Awadh, for about 200 people who are going to now work on the home collection.
Right.
So while we have 450 women working for our Mijwa collection, which is chicken curry, for the clothes, there are going to be 200 more people employed for home. So it kind of, you employ more people, you're challenged a lot more. I think that's a natural process, and at least it's a process I'm really enjoying, and I love to work. I hate Sundays. I hate weekends.
So while, social sustainability has been your focus, I feel it's impossible to have a panel on fashion without addressing the elephant in the room, which is environmental sustainability. And I think particularly this year, as journalists, we're trying to see trends and planning stories. Sequins and glitter has been this annoying overriding trend this year.
I love sparkle.
But they're one of the worst possible things for the environment, the microplastics in it. So just as a technical question, what will Manish Malhotra do without the sequins? Are you thinking of sustainable ways to
Well, I'll think of a nice manipulation and of fabric, and I'll say wear that beautiful necklace with it that will add the sparkle. So that's where jewelry comes in.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, there's many ways to be carbon neutral. And I think to me, in, this journey that we're taking towards being more responsible, because I think, the word sustainability is being bandied around so much so that it feels now that the connotation is becoming negative to me, because it's like there's no person that you meet in a conversation.
Yeah, it doesn't seem serious
regardless
because
of
everyone
topic,
is saying it.
that word is not being used, and I think it needs to be also used responsibly. So for me, what we've tried to do, the show that I last did was not to be sold commercially. We did it as a gift, as my love letter to Greece, and something that we wanted to dedicate to raising awareness for Elpida. Beyond that, we had incredible requests coming from women who saw the show, not necessarily attended it, but saw that show happen, requesting pieces that they wanted to make made to measure. And I know it's a big business in India, and it's also, I think, looking at couture, maybe 10 years ago we used to say couture is dead. Or within, London, we used to say couture is dead. Now it's come a 360 where that couture is actually the most sustainable part of fashion today, because you're producing for your customer, you're doing a piece that's meant to measure around them.
Fashion, right?
It's slow fashion, and it's against the throwaway fashion that has been pretty much the trend for the past 10, 20 years. So back to your point about reusing, you want to create unique pieces that have a unique voice that make women feel special, that they can keep in their closets for their entire life and pass it on for generations to come. So
They become heirlooms.
Like heirlooms. And to me, the show that I did, and what I hope to do in the future, is create collections where you're able to, I don't want to say make them bespoke for every single customer, but what I do want to say is that you make pieces made to measure that will stand the test of time, that will be timeless. And there's so many ways now that people are considering sustainability. Most of the embroideries we did was with upcycled sequins.
Right.
And even that, upcycling, we upcycle as an independent business, we upcycle in our toiling process every single season. Past season's print. We do collaborations where what we use is prints from our archive or fabrics that we've developed 10 years ago. There's a way for people to be sustainable without having to shout about it. It's what you said before, it should come naturally. It shouldn't necessarily be a conversation. Now I'm creating a sustainable
Like a
collection.
poster conversation.
Yes, it's not about a poster conversation. It's about thinking responsibly and also communicating those values out and creating a community around you that believes in the future of fashion, or else fashion will die.
I mean, I think, sorry to interrupt, and I think one thing in the conversation of sustainability, I always think I think we should start off with this deepest gratitude that we're having this conversation about sustainability. That's in the forefront in fashion. The second thing is not to get overwhelmed that you have to be 100% sustainable. Even the brands that we think are 100% sustainable, they aren't. And the leaders of the
cannot be sustainable.
So
by nature.
I think I always feel like one step at a time. The first step was to have a conversation. It's led to us talking about it. I mean, cut to let's say 2 or 3 years ago, we wouldn't be having this. We were not having this conversation.
Talk about in trends, out
Exactly. We'd be talking about my obsession with Manish Malhotra's Rangila days. We'll be talking about.
We should talk about that
So
sometime.
that's how I know about
That's
him.
another session. Not
So anyway, so I think the main thing is gratitude that we're having this conversation, and not to get overwhelmed that we have to do 10%. That's all it takes individually. If we can just collectively do 10% of sustainable practices, collectively that is a massive movement.
Great, that's a good note to end on. Do we have time to take
We
don't
don't.
have time for questions? Okay. Thank you so much. You've been a wonderful audience.
Thank you so much. Thank you.